Welcome to the Workplace Wellbeing Essential Series. I'm Mari Ryan. I'm the CEO and founder of Advancing Wellness. It's my pleasure to welcome you today to this expert interview where we explore topics that impact employee well-being. My guest today is Julie Ann Sullivan. Julie Ann Sullivan's diverse background gives her a unique perspective as a business culture expert. She earned a BA in psychology and an MBA in accounting, earning the designation of CPA. Julie Ann is an international best-selling author, and her current book is titled Catalysts of Culture: How Visionary Leaders Activate the Employee Experience. It's based on what she has learned from her experience and vast research, including hosting the Businesses That Care podcast. Julie Ann is also a certified laughter leader and trainer. When she's not speaking, training, podcasting, or coaching, she lives in Pittsburgh with her wonder dog, Joy. Julie Ann, I'm so excited to have you here today.
Well, I'm excited too. I don't know when this is going to air, but the day we're recording it is Joy's 4th birthday.
Well, happy birthday to your pup.
And hopefully she won't bark through the interview.
Well, if we don't hear Joy, we'll most likely hear Zoe. So one of them will definitely let us know that we are well loved with our pups in our lives. So let's explore our topic a little bit. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the concept of purpose in the context of culture in the workplace. When we think about the traditional profit at all cost business model, that's long gone. You and I both learned that in business school. Yeah, well, we hope it's long gone. But that's, what we learned in business school is not the way businesses are functioning today. And they're moving much more towards the goal of having a clear purpose in the world. That's something that's bigger than just profit. And we're also seeing that purpose becomes an essential element in engaging employees in the workplace. A recent Daniel Goleman article stated that millennials are 5 times more likely to stay when they have a strong connection to the employer's purpose.
Absolutely.
But the data also shows that purpose-driven companies are more profitable over the long haul. So let's explore this link between purpose, employee engagement, and employee well-being. So, Julie Ann, I'm curious, from your experience and from what you're seeing with your work with your clients, what role does purpose play in creating a thriving culture?
Well, it's interesting because it's important for people to have a purpose bigger than the small piece or job that they're doing. And to be able to do, not only to be able to show people what the greater purpose is, but to live that greater purpose in everything they do. So it's really nice to have a nice mission statement and values we want to follow. But if we don't act like that every day, it's meaningless. So purpose is really important in a company. People should know the purpose of what it is they specifically do. And they should also know what purpose it has for the big picture. Let me give you an example. There was a company that I worked with who was an air brake company for airplanes, right? And they had signs everywhere, and they put it in all their mailings and and they talked about it all the time in the bottom of their paychecks. And it said, "We save lives." Now, that was their big purpose, right? And the interesting thing about that is the people who were putting a screw in on the assembly line were far more valued and felt like they were far more valued and felt their work was more valued than just working on an assembly line, especially in those situations. If you just thought, oh yeah, all I do is put screws here every day, that's kind of boring and doesn't really build your own self-esteem and worth. But when you're thinking, when it's been put into everything that you do, that every time you do that, you're helping to save lives,
Mm,
that person is going to pay attention to what they're doing a lot
yeah.
differently than if all they feel like is, I just put a screw in here 1,000 times a day.
Well, it gives them something to feel connected to that has
Absolutely.
meaning, something that
That
really
big
has meaning.
picture.
Right.
Yep. And
Exactly.
and that meaning is valuable. Saving lives is valuable
Of
where they
course.
may not think their particular piece is valuable,
Hmm.
even though it is. So picking a purpose that makes everybody a part of the wheel going round and round, right? If one of those spokes is broken, it's broken. The wheel can't go.
Right. Can you talk a little bit about when you're working with clients, how do you integrate purpose into the culture of the workplace?
Well, I think it's interesting. Sometimes you can run a survey and you can ask everybody in a room. I've done this with leadership teams. What's the purpose of this company? And the most interesting exercise is for everyone to read their definition.
Yeah.
And they're all so different. But what it
Mm,
does is it gives a starting point to work from. So you talk to the president or the CEO of the company and get their vision of what the purpose is. Then you have all the leadership write out what their purpose is.
mm,
And then you see, okay, we got some work to do. And it's very easy to see what areas of work you have to do. So I always like starting with that. You have to know what you're dealing with.
mm,
And then the people who didn't see the same vision as the CEO or the president, what's missing? And
mm.
asking them, engaging them by saying, okay, you're at this point over here. How can we get you to this point over here?
Mm.
Excuse me. So, like I said, if you lay everything out there, then you're building a pathway to move from one place to another. And you can engage people by asking them how they see that bridge being built or having them help build that bridge.
That sounds a really good approach to be able to really help people make those connections.
Exactly. Because if you don't know where everyone's starting point is, you're really just kind of shooting in the dark,
Right.
right?
Right.
You're saying, oh, this is the way we're going to make everyone know our purpose. Well, it's going to work for some, but it's not going to work for everyone. And again, like you said, asking people how to get to a goal,
Mm,
which again is another new way of doing business. Instead of the CEOs coming up with all the answers,
right.
they've learned now in good business to ask people, and doesn't that give them more purpose too? We're really a part of where this company is going.
Well, they feel committed to that purpose by knowing that you know, their
Input,
contributions matter.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
That's great. That's great. In the model that we use with our clients on for well-being, which is adapted from some research from the Gallup organization, purpose is one of the key elements of that. And it's an important part, I believe, a really important part of well-being, so that we really feel that connection to something that is bigger than ourselves. I'm curious, from your perspective, how do you see the link between purpose and well-being?
Well, I've actually read some research on this, and the research has said that people who have purpose live longer lives. Right. So they're not just kind of going through life, kind of like running through bumper guards, right? Going this way, going this way. They really have a purpose. And that's in any part of your life, but
Mm,
especially at work. Um, One of the ideas I've done with companies is, and I've seen it work, is when they have a long term project, they celebrate along the way. They
mm,
don't wait until it's finished.
right.
So that adds purpose into what they're doing, and they don't have to wait a long time to celebrate that piece of the purpose of the project that they're doing. Um, like I said, the biggest question I ask people is write down, what the purpose of the work you do is, and then what's the purpose of the work you do. And the difference should be great. One should be small, one should be larger.
Mm-hmm.
When people do that, well, first of all, if you think about well-being, and I've learned this from being the certified laughter leader, you have a lot less stress.
Yeah.
And stress is just a killer. Stress isn't, stress is good in an immediate situation, like when you almost get run over by a car, right? You step off the sidewalk and a car comes by. That gives you stress, but that also saves your life. But elongated stress, let's go back to the person who's putting screws into an assembly every day, 1,000 times a day. If they don't see the bigger picture, that's a very stressful, boring, unworthy job, right? It becomes repetition. It becomes old school. It becomes something they don't pay attention to. Mm-hmm. So when you shift and give people purpose, they feel better about themselves. When people feel better about themselves, they have better resilience to stress. And when they have better resilience to stress, then they have less stress in their lives. And there is an abundance of research that shows that will help you with your weight, that will help you with your sleep. And sleep, I could go on about sleep forever, because that's connected to everything too. Stress affects every organ in your body. It affects how sharp your mind works. So connection, there's a million connections with well-being, both psychologically, but physically as well. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people forget about that cortisol that comes out when you're stressed, right. When it sits in your body for long periods of time, I'm going to say it again, it affects your kidneys, your liver, your heart, your lungs. Who wants to do that? So I try to make people understand that by building a better culture, they're building better humans. That human in your workplace then goes out and deals with their partners, their spouses, their kids, their parents, their siblings, their friends, their volunteer organizations, the people at the grocery store, everyone they come in contact with. So when you are creating a better human life for someone, you have a lot of influence way beyond that one person.
Well, you're right. The cascading effect that an organization can have when they look after and care for their people is wide-ranging. You're right. It's absolutely on target. Excellent.
I always say, if we would all be 10% kinder tomorrow, this would be a really different world.
Oh, if we could own what we can wish for, right?
Well, you do it one person at a time.
Well, you're right. You're right. And I know you do that with your clients and with your audiences and everyone that you touch. In the earlier in our conversation, we talked a little bit about how we've come from this profit model and now working more towards this purpose model. What about profit? Isn't profit a purpose?
Well, it's got to be part of the plan. You got to make money because, sometimes when I encounter people with horrible customer service, I think to myself, well, if you're not good to your customers, you're not going to have any customers, and then everyone's going to be out of a job.
Right.
But you have to take people from short-term thinking to long-term thinking, which is harder than you might think because of the world that we live in and everything's, really quick. But yeah, profit's important. The interesting piece of that is when I work with companies and they want to know about the ROI, I know that their ROI is going to show up in how much better they can recruit people, how much better their retention rates are going to be. And let's face it, We already know that when people leave a company, it costs you 150% of their salary to replace them, if not more. Right? We know that over $500 billion is being wasted in lack of productivity every year in companies. Each company holds a piece of that. So ROI, well, we just saved a lot of money right there. Having people be more productive. And then if you happen to be, well, anywhere, there can be errors, but certainly in the manufacturing space, safety is a huge concern. And when somebody isn't paying attention to what they're doing and they get hurt on the job, that affects everyone on their team, could affect the whole company. You know, it's huge. Yeah. So profit's important. Purpose automatically really flows out and creates more profit on many different levels. It will in sales, but it also will in these other areas that sometimes companies have to be educated. You know, they only look at the revenue. But profit is a net figure. It's not revenue.
Right. You know, I like to think about it as profit is an outcome. When you have a really well-defined purpose and a strong culture where you care for your people, profit will follow. Profit's the outcome.
And it's been shown a gazillion times. I'll give you an example. I interviewed the COO from Dwyer Group, which is now Neighborly. And they had, when I talked to her, they had a list of values. And every time they had a meeting with 2 or more people, they would either recite their values or they would talk about one of them for 1 minute before the meeting. The 2 years that they were doing that consistently, everywhere, all the way down to all the franchisees, they doubled their revenue. Now, there were probably other factors in there, but they do put a lot of that in that practice that they incorporated into their everyday life. And that's what some people do with purpose and anything they change in their culture. It's an idea. It has to be a practice.
Well, I love that idea, and I love the tangible aspect of that as something that an employer can specifically do. I'm curious whether you have any other specific actionable items that employers can do to integrate purpose into the culture of their organization.
Well, again, like I said about this one airline brake company, they just had that saying, that small quote, right, which made what they did really big, and they had it everywhere you looked, everything you took part in, anything that you got in your hand that was printed on the screen and the signatures, it was everywhere. So it was a part of the fabric of the company. And the other is in communication. I highly recommend a CEO, president, C-suite leaders coming up with what their purpose is and then going out to their workforce and finding out what they think their purpose is. And I always recommend having an outside facilitator helping with that, because it's like, if anybody out there has kids, you can tell your kids something 50 times. And then one day they come home and say, Bobby's mother just told him this, and it was brilliant. Like you never said it. It's just human nature.
It is. Yeah.
And so I think that is a huge, tangible idea. I was just talking to somebody yesterday, about a lot of changes are going through in their company, and some things were sold off and some things were purchased, and now they've got a new soup, so to speak, and they got to figure out, what to do with it, because they have several cultures coming together and whatever. And so I said, the most important thing in change, because I've done a lot of work in change management, And the biggest thing with change is you have to have a plan first.
Right.
And then you got to cut it down into little itty bitty pieces and take baby steps to get to the end result, knowing that by the time you get to the end result, it could look very differently. So a CEO can say, this is the purpose of our company, and then realize that he or she is missing the mark somehow, right? If, most of your workforce comes back and says, well, we see the purpose as this. Maybe the two meld together. Maybe they have to let go of what they have and see that their company's turned a corner. Maybe that purpose is old school and now we're into new school. Having that open-mindedness, being open to new ideas is really, really important.
Well, I totally agree with you with the approach of really having the conversations and the input from the employees and really making their voice heard and their understanding of what it's like from them doing their job day in and day out and translating that purpose into their everyday job. So I totally agree with that approach. That's great.
Yeah, because people in the C-suite are not doing the jobs of the other people.
Right.
And they don't know what works and doesn't work. Exactly. It's like somebody buying, this is from my accounting days, somebody buying a software, and I've seen this in companies a million times. People who don't use the software buy the new software for the company and never really ask for anybody's input.
Right.
And then they figure it's going to work. What?
Doesn't work. Right. Exactly. That's great.
That's not something that works.
Well, I appreciate those good suggestions on specifically the kinds of approaches that employers can take. Julie Ann, if our audience wants to learn more about you and the work that you're doing, where can they get in touch with you?
Well, they can look for me at julieannsullivan.com without an E on the Ann. And I think you're putting it on the screen right now so they can see that. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm everywhere. I have a podcast, businessesthatcare.com. That podcast every week has some idea, some strategic idea that you can use in your business. And most of them I've interviewed over 60 C-suite leaders who actually are utilizing these ideas to create and sustain great cultures. So it's not just an idea, it's real, it works. You can adapt it for your own company. Maybe some of them you'll listen to and say, I can't do that. Or maybe you can, or maybe you can adapt it to fit your size. And I have interviewed companies from all industries, all sizes, and all longevities. And they all have tremendous ideas. So I would suggest listening to the Businesses That Care podcast along with this one. I would suggest going to my website or going to LinkedIn and contacting me with any question. I'm happy to have a conversation with anyone that wants to find out what that first step is or what their next step is. There's a lot of companies out there now that have great cultures, but it's kind of like saying it's a living document. It's a living philosophy. Mm-hmm. At some point, you might run out of ideas and want some new ones.
Well, we certainly appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us today. We'll definitely hopefully our audience will definitely check out your podcast as well as visit you on your website or be in touch with you. Julie Ann, I'm really delighted to spend this time with you today. Thanks so much for being here.
Oh, it was my pleasure, Mary. Thank you so much.